this evening is something that I have thought about for a long time. As most of you know, I'm in the wedding industry, and in one of the associations I belong to, once a year we have what's called our signature event, where we invite newly married couples to come and tell their story of how they met and planning their wedding and getting married and things of that nature. And I thought February would be a good time to just have kind of a couple session. Now, there are singles here, and I know that there are singles and couples, and I had invited one of my single friends to be here this evening, and she could not be here to talk, and there are two other couples that were supposed to be here this evening that were not able to make it. So we're just going to have fun with whoever's here. Now, I would invite you on your table to look at the list of questions that I put out there, because there are questions for singles and there are questions for couples to think about in terms of participating this evening. And in that vein, I also put out just a really fun statistic. Being in the wedding business, we keep an eye on how people meet. And so I charted out for you how people had met from the 1950s until the 2020s. And if you look at that chart, by far and away up until the 2010s, basically friends are how folks met. And then if you look at the 1990s when the internet was launched, you'll see that dramatic height until the 2020s, where 62% of people now meet online. 62%. And so in the wedding world, I've seen this dramatically also. 15 years ago, when couples would talk to me, they'd say, well, we met online, but we don't want anybody to know. We don't want anybody to know. And it's okay if you tell folks we met at the freshman party in our dorm and we were all drunk with alcohol. That's okay if you tell them that, but not that we met online. And now people are, yeah, we met, everybody knows we met online. It's posted, it's everything else. But some couples are like, well, we don't want people to know that we met on this website. Yeah. There are a couple of websites that are like, no. But it also speaks to some of the dynamics of what's happening in the world today in terms of being online and people in terms of being isolated and being alone and not reaching out, using the internet as a way of developing their relationships. And I think from a church perspective, that's something that we need to keep in mind as we reach out to those who choose to just be at home. A lot of us introverts, we just love being at home by ourselves. It's easier to do that than to come out and meet somebody. But it's also good to know that brew houses and bars are still where people meet also. And that has increased a little bit, and mainly because if you remember the last 10 to 20 years, all the new ale houses and brew houses and, have just sprung up all over the place. So that is now, again, becoming a really common place to meet. So for this evening, when I announced this, and when I took over Taproom Theology, I was saying, in February, I want to do something on love. And at that point, Sarah and Will, who most of you know from church, ran to me and said, I love this. I'm happy to talk about C.S. Lewis and Agape and Eros and Philia. And I'm like, you have it. You have it. And then when I asked them to do that, they said, did we really say we would do that? So, as you know, Will and Sarah have known each other for a long time. I'm going to let them tell their story. But Sarah in particular has a great love of C.S. Lewis. And so we talked about combining scriptures this evening with some of their stories and some of the readings. And then the one couple that did show up tonight, thank you very much, Liz and Chris. Big hand for Liz and Chris. Yay! And I gave them a list of questions, but also, we can have a lot of folks join in also, whether you're single or a couple. We're going to open it up to questions and conversation and go as long as we can this evening. So without further ado, Sarah and Will, take it away.
Thank you, sir, please. Oh, it is me. Hello. So I think where we started was we were kind of using the basis of like C.S. Lewis's The Four Loves. Jeff threw a fifth one in there, so I might make him explain that one. But I think the first one that we were starting with was Agape. And again, C.S. Lewis is so much more eloquent than I am, so I just kind of pulled a lot of the things he said, but it's basically kind of love that's rooted in commitment and action and usually described with God. So he quotes St. Augustine, who said, "What comes of giving one's heart to anything but God is sorrow. All human beings pass away. Do not let your happiness depend on something you may lose. If love is to be a blessing, not a misery, it must be for the only beloved who will never pass away." I think you had.
And there's a Bible verse for this, which is 1 John. Yes. There's a Bible verse for this. It would be 1 John 4, 7 through 8, which is, "Beloved, let us love one another, because love is of God. Everyone who loves is begotten by God and knows God. Whoever is without love does not know God, for God is love." So this is where it shows up whenever feelings fade, or when you're caregiving, or just in forgiveness, just in daily life, like what this is, just giving love to another because they are human. Like, just that's the reason why you love someone, is because they are human, and God shows himself in those people and just in everyone. So it's just self-giving there.
Do you want us to go through all four, or did you want to go on that for?
I'll let you take the lead, and so what I would like each of you to think about is, when you think of the agape love, and if you look at the question, where in your life have you experienced agape love, that unconditional sacrificial love, and what does that mean to you in your life? And so we'll let you think on that as they go through the next one. And when it comes to Eros love, we're not going to ask you about too many questions about that, but go ahead.
Okay, so the next one, which I'm really excited about because I'm from Philadelphia, is Philia, which is friendship, or that's the closest word for it. And I really love this quote, again by C.S. Lewis, who's, again, he quotes a lot of other people, which makes it confusing. But he said, "In this kind of love, as Emerson said, do you love me means, do you see the same truth? Or at least, do you care about the same truth? The person who agrees with us that some question, little regarded by others, is of great importance can be our friend. He need not agree with us about the answer." And he also kind of went on to say that, friendship, and he's like, I don't mean this in a bad way, but it's kind of like the least instinctive, organic, biological, gregarious, or necessary love, because there's not a biological purpose for it. There's not a survival purpose. It's just that you like people.
And the Bible verse for this one would be John 15, 12 through 15, which is, "This is my commandment. Love one another as I love you. No one has a greater love than to lay down his life for one's friends. You are my friends if you do what I command you. I no longer call you slaves, because a slave does not know what his master is doing. I have called you friends because I have told you everything I have heard from my Father." So again, this is just, like Sarah said, it's just friendship. It's the chosen family and the community bonds that you have. It's saying that, everyone can have someone. You don't have to do anything special. It's just because you are close to each other, in proximity and work and life. It's just, this is someone that you have chosen to spend time with and to be friends with and to love them in that way.
Awesome. So our next one is, I think it's pronounced Storge. I'm looking at the seminary people who took Greek.
It's all Hebrew to me. So.
Oh, gosh. So this one's mostly described as affection, and is kind of seen as almost like the lightest of all the loves. But I kind of really love this, again, by C.S. Lewis, because he says, "The warm comfortableness, the satisfaction in being together takes in all sorts of objects. It is indeed the least discriminating of loves. There are women for whom we can predict few dates, and men who are likely to have few friends. They have nothing to offer." But almost anyone can become an object of affection, the ugly, the stupid, even the exasperating. So a lot of times this is talking about, I feel like going from that to saying, it's like parents and children, sounds kind of bad, but they kind of say it's not really based on anything. It's not a common theme of friendship or this overpowering agape love. It's just the affection you have for people in your life.
Yeah, and this one would be Romans 12:10, which says, "Just love one another with mutual affection. Anticipate one another in showing honor." So again, like Sarah said, this is kind of it's familial love. It's your friends, or like your family and the people that you choose to spend time with, and the closeness that you have there. You don't have to do anything special to feel that love. It's just you are there with your family, with your friends. Things can be rough and like you can get mad at each other and everything, but you just have that closeness and that knit tightness that can't ever be separated. Yes. Exactly. Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know whose eyes I should stare in when talking about Eros, but so I'm actually going to quote a different C.S. Lewis thing from after his wife died that kind of reminded me of that. Is he said, "There's one place where her absence comes locally home to me, and it is a place I can't avoid. I mean my own body. It had suffered such a different importance when it was the body of her lover. Now it's like an empty house. For those few years, she and I feasted on love, every mode of it. Solemn and merry, romantic and realistic, sometimes as dramatic as a thunderstorm, sometimes as comfortable and unempathetic as putting on your soft slippers." But he also goes on to say that sexual experience can occur without Eros, without being, quote, in love, and that Eros includes other things besides sexual activity. And if you prefer to put it that way, he's not inquiring into the sexuality which is common to us and animals, or even common to all people, but to one uniquely human variation of it, which develops within love, what I call Eros. Sexual desire without Eros wants it, the thing itself. Eros wants the beloved.
And there's a lot of great scripture about Eros, which is kind of funny, but if you look at like Song of Songs, there's a ton of stuff about that. But
Smutty.
You'll have Proverbs 5:18 through 19, which is, "Let your fountain be blessed and have joy of the wife of your youth, your lovely hind and your graceful doe, of whose love you will ever have your fill, and by her ardor always be intoxicated." So yeah, this is just your desire and like the heat and the passion of love.
Lastly is the one that was not in the Four Loves. It's Ahava. How do you say that? Ahava? Which I saw a lot of places comparing like agape love to more like New Testament love, and Ahava to more Old Testament love, where it's like love is loyalty, faithfulness, and relationship over time, held together by emotion, action, and promise.
Yeah, and so one of the quotes for this is from Deuteronomy. It's 6:5, which is, "Therefore you shall love the Lord your God with your whole heart and with your whole being and with your whole strength." And this is, again, like covenantal love. Like it's the love that you have with God, and basically only, I think, God. But you can kind of see through this. It's all of the loves are kind of connected in some way. Like you are supposed to love your neighbor as you know, God loves you, or in a godly way. You're supposed to feel love for your friends and family and just give yourself for your friends. And through this, I kind of feel like this love kind of surrounds and all encompasses them. And as the first quote said, is whoever is without love does not know God, for God is love.
Thank you. When you look at this, whether you're coupled up or whether you're single, each one of these can touch one of us. The Hebrew word ava, it's not only that I shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, your mind, and your soul, but love your neighbor as yourself, which comes from, I believe that's Deuteronomy. So when people hear the Great Commandment, a lot of folks don't realize this was actually embedded in the Old Testament, that is the core creed of Christianity. And so when you think of agape love, we think of the sacrificial love of God and Jesus Christ on the cross. In coupledom, it is a sacrificial love. And even as singles, and a single person, I was single for some 30-odd years before I met my partner, it was learning about what agape love was to my friends and my family and those that were closest to me, and is that love that I could give them. You know, the brotherly love, that seems relatively simple, but it's not as simple as people think it is. And in coupledom, you can have both brotherly love. When I'm working with couples, I will tell you that when the couple says, well, you know, we got to know each other and we were friends before we started dating. I said, and then, you know, this is my best friend. And I work with another couples that There are a lot of couples that don't say, this is my best friend. This is somebody that I love. Well, what is a best friend? Best friend, the old joke is the best friend is somebody who knows everything about you and still likes you besides that. And so it is about loving the person for who they are in their wholeness. And even when you start talking about the family love, in familial love, that has a different relationship. And I'll give you a simple example. When the oldest child marries the youngest child, a lot of times what you do is you have like a parent-child interaction. And half the time you have to get them to figure out how they communicate as adults, because the youngest, and I'm the youngest, who Annette and I are both the youngest, so we have a lot of fun being child talk. We have to move that up to adult talk sometimes. But I see couples where one is being the oldest child. How many of you are the oldest child? Okay. How many of you are are you the youngest child or oldest?
Youngest.
You're the youngest. So do you see what I'm talking about? Any of the oldest married or in a relationship with the youngest, or been in a relationship with the youngest? Okay, so you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. I'll say, no, you got to move into talking about Jeff. Who's the oldest? Oh, okay.
My maturity.
Yeah, sure, Jeff, let's go with that. But in terms of the whole family dynamic, that then expands itself to children and to cousins and to uncles. My sister once said to me one time, well, you can't choose your family. So regardless of whether you like them or not, they're your family. And so that puts a lot of pressure on you sometimes when you have a family member you don't like, and they have a need. But when we talk about eros love, a lot of times we default to the physical sexual love. But also it is very important from a Christian context to understand it from a sacramental love, of a sacred spiritual bonding together. That's why the Bible says, the man shall leave his father and mother and cling unto the wife, and the two shall become one flesh. That's an incredibly important statement when you talk about the physical bond that binds two people together, that may start physical, but then transcends into something deeply, deeply spiritual, and then over time becomes something that is a bonding characteristic within couples. Now, in terms of that, for those of us, when I was single for a long time, we were in a generation of people being body shamed. And so I think part of that is learning to love yourself for who you are. Who is your body? And just loving that identity of who you have in and of yourself. So those are my just kind of off-the-cuff thoughts right then and there. Now, before I turn it over to Liz and Chris to tell us their journey, I'm going to invite you to just look over these questions, because when Liz and Chris finish their story, I'm going to have you kind of divide up and just talk about the love that you can give right now, the struggles you may have. No, don't read that, Liz. You already had your questions. So, Liz, why don't you come over here, and then we can get you both on camera for prosperity. And you can tell us your story. Now, as Liz and Chris are getting themselves set, I want to tell a little fun story about Liz. Liz co-led one of our life groups on, which one was it again? Vitality. And so she was saying she was from Louisiana and she was from Shreveport. And I said, Shreveport, right? I said, well, that's fascinating because I just listened to a podcast about the riverboat captains on the Mississippi. And she goes, yes, Captain Shreveport. Yes. I'm so sorry, y'all. So, and I was just so fascinated that I just heard that and I could put it together from where she had grown up. So I'm going to turn Liz and Chris over to tell us their story. And I gave them just some questions to think about, and I'll let them take it from here. Big round of applause.
Thank you. When Jeff asked us to do this, I said yes, but we are very laconic talkers, so this will be quick. Chris and I met in high school. We were in several classes together, one including creative writing, and I remember being struck by how just absolutely sweet and kind he was. And I literally remember going home to my mom and saying, Chris McCallan is the nicest guy I've ever met, and I would love to end up with someone like him. And then 4 years later, we started dating. During COVID, we were at different colleges, but we were home for the summer because my internship had been moved to online and Chris's plans had been canceled. So we ended up both in Shreveport, and we reconnected through a friend. And if it weren't for that, we may not be together, but you never know. But we went back to our separate colleges, and he came over from Ruston, Louisiana. Ruston, yes. I get confused because of Reston. Ruston, Louisiana to Fort Worth, Texas, and we went out on a date and fell in love very quickly and got engaged after college and married 1 year later. So now I'm 26 and Chris is 25.
You cougar, you.
9 months. And we've been married almost 3 years now. And one thing that I shared with Jeff at our book study was an example of how I feel that the Holy Spirit has been on our lives, which is taking the leap from moving from Louisiana to Northern Virginia. We were totally, I guess, naive to all that this area had, and we're just taking the leap. And it's one of those things that we just feel in retrospect was the hand of God to take such a leap, but at the time we didn't know that. And so that's one of the things I think we look back on as the most prevalent example of God's love in our life for leading us to this place where we've had such an amazing community and grown in our faith through restoration.
Yeah. I mean, that she pretty much nailed it on the head there. But I guess something I can say is that I think a common theme of our relationship is just being able to lean on each other. I mean, I think that's ultimately what it comes down to, is having someone you can lean on no matter what. And that's really kind of one of the biggest things I've seen in our 3 years now of marriage, almost. But it's really like, it ranges from, did you have a bad day at work? Like, who's the person you can go to every time, and like, they don't need to know exact details. They just need to be there for you and be a shoulder to lean on. And that doesn't have to be a romantic partner, but I think when it comes to marriage, at least between me and her, it's just, I think it's just unwavering baseline stronghold to go back to when you're just like, feel like you're under attack or things are just piling on top of you. You got somebody who can just like help you carry the load. So I think all of us at some point in our lives have needed somebody to just take some of the load off. So, yeah.
So, thank you, Liz, for sharing what you went to your mother and said, he is just the nicest guy. Chris, when you met her, you've been married now, so you can be honest. You ain't going anywhere. What was your thought after that initial meeting and getting to know her initially in high school?
So in high school, I always saw Elizabeth as just someone who was just really nice and really cool. She might not agree with me, but I always thought I was like, oh, she's just so nice. And she just seems like she's always a cool person to talk to. And we just didn't know each other very well. And then when we really connected, it was not just how cool you are, but how thoughtful you are, how kind. I think you're always thinking of other people pretty much constantly. And you just have a way of just showing that and making people be seen and loved. And I remember I felt seen and loved by you before we even really fell in love. So, and also you're just really funny. So.
Now, when you went to your mother, Liz, and you said he's kind, that's really a broad stroke. Can you say more about that as you've gotten to know him, about that kindness and building on that?
Yes, I would say I'm a pretty cynical person, and so is the rest of my family. But with Chris, I've never met someone who truly just sees the good in people, and it's not an act, it's just something he
feels deep down, I know. And so you can see that in someone's everyday life, how they look at the world and look for the optimistic viewpoint. You know, they talk about how the things you love most about your partner also drive you crazy. So, you know, when I go and complain about my day and he tries to put, look on the bright side, I'm like, I'm not ready to look on the bright side. But it is truly one of my favorite things about him. And that was evident from when we even hardly knew each other.
So when one of you has, quote, a problem, not with the other one, but in general, is one of you the listener and one of you the problem solver?
Elizabeth is a born problem solver in the best way possible. She sees or hears an issue and she's like, I want to solve this, and I want to do this because it'll make us feel better quicker, essentially. It'll get us to the other side quicker. And I very much appreciate that when it comes to our relationship, just because she can come up with solutions. I tell everybody I'm not an idea guy. She's the idea woman. She just knows how to approach a problem and figure it out. And I love putting a plan into action. I just can't come up with a plan. So I think we really complement each other in that way. Whenever we kind of have an issue or one person has an issue, we really kind of help each other out.
Just a couple more questions, and then we're going to kind of break into groups and have more conversation and then come back into dialogue. Now, the little that I know of your history, Liz, is that you were part of the Disciples of Christ Church down in that town in Louisiana that I can't pronounce correctly, which had some very progressive thinking, which is common for a lot of the Disciples of Christ. How did faith play a role in your relationship, you know, in terms of importance, based, anything like that? I'll just leave it as an open-ended question.
I think it played a small role at the beginning, but then when we moved here and went to join a church together, we really got aligned on what faith means to us. And I grew up where my dad was a pastor, so I was used to going to church with just my mom and brother and kind of not getting to experience that church experience with my entire family, just kind of a segment of it. And so I was really looking forward to kind of growing in faith with my husband, which is like my new, immediate family.
You got it, Chris.
Oh, okay. Cool. So I think how I grew up, I did go to church like pretty much all the time, pretty much every week. But I think in college I had never gone to church of my own accord, I believe. I think it is not because I lost faith in God or anything. It's more just like I just got so focused on myself. So I think coming here together and being able to find a church and just like, I was like, wow, I didn't realize how much was like missing from my life. Just being able to kind of find community together and just doing that together. And just having someone to share with and to just bolster my faith in God was like really huge and just a big boon in my life. So,
Great. So when you moved here, my one question is, now that you've been married for 3 years, what is different than what you expected? How is marriage different than what you thought it would be?
I think one thing you realize after being married 3 years like us and knowing everything is that you have to learn how to find kind of the romance and that like deep love for each other in the mundane every day. And I don't think that's something you think about when you're falling in love and getting engaged, how it'll just turn into leaving for work, coming back home, going to church, going to hang out with friends, but which are all amazing things that I'm so thankful for, but it just is very repetitive. And so one thing I didn't expect to be sharing after 3 years of marriage is that we find a lot of value in being apart for a little bit and then coming back together and finding so much joy in being together again and appreciating each other almost anew.
So I don't know if you know this, but what you described was, a couple falling in love, deeply in love with the deep physical attraction. My standard joke is you met in writing class, but soon after that you started studying chemistry, and then, but then once you're married, you moved into that kind of family love where you are now bound together, but also a love of friendship, and then learning how to move back and forth within that, which is not easy sometimes. Couples, and that's one of the big tricks. Now, big round of applause for them. Thank you.